On the evening of November 6, 1923, flames viciously ripped through the Ottawa Beach Hotel along the shores of Black Lake, completely destroying what had been one of the nation's grandest resorts of its time and playground to the Midwest's elite. No longer would thousands of visitors make summer pilgrimage to the beach resort to enjoy carefree respite from city life. The glory era in West Michigan tourism unexpectedly ended in ashes. Wealthy Midwesterners who vacationed at Black Lake and Lake Michigan resorts weren't the first people drawn to the crystal waters, golden sands, and tree-crested dunes. The region along the central eastern shore of Lake Michigan on the state's sunset side was first inhabited by Native Americans from the Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi tribes. Tribal peoples summered on the inland lake banks, sheltered behind hills from powerful Great Lakes storms. Fish were a plentiful food source for the tribes, and cooling breezes provided relief from unrelenting July and August heat. But the young American nation was stretching out and growing up. Land was eagerly sought for settlement. In 1821, tribal chiefs signed one of the two documents called the Treaty of Chicago, ceding land south of the Grand River to the United States, opening the Ottawa County area for settlement. The territory was officially surveyed in 1832. By 1836, a group of ambitious entrepreneurs had built a sawmill, shipyard, and tannery at Superior Point and operated the first ferry across Lake Macatawa. Due to difficult financial times and the death of its leader, Edward Macy, the settlement was abandoned in 1839. 8 years later, a group of Dutch colonists found their way to the shores of Black Lake to claim a stake in the New World, charting the course of West Michigan history. The area's Native Americans relocated north to the Traverse City region after signing this Treaty of Chicago. At the same time, across the Atlantic, the people of the Netherlands experienced a period of severe economic and religious strife. The secession movement within the Reformed Church, involving primarily lower-class farmers, laborers, and village craftsmen, divided the population. When crop failure wiped out most of the food sources in 1845 and 1846, Reverend Albertus Fenralti formed an emigration society to seek relief abroad. Land in America was cheap, food was abundant, and people could worship as they saw fit, providing the dream of a better life for a wearied people. Their 45-day ocean voyage to America cost each family $200. Immigrants sold their land, their homes, and possessions to raise the needed funds. On a September day in 1846, Reverend Van Raalte departed Rotterdam Port with 110 colonists bound for the New World. Their final destination, Wisconsin. Winter's wrath came early to the Great Lakes that year, changing the colonists' plans. The group was forced to take refuge for the season in Detroit. The colonists' unexpected delay in Detroit gave a Michigan delegation time to interest Van Raalte in planning his colony in the state. On New Year's Day, 1847, the Reverend explored the Black River and Black Lake region for the first time. He immediately recognized the value of navigable waters in creating industry, for providing fish for commerce and as a food source, the forests for providing lumber for building homes and firewood, and for supplying sawmills to manufacture marketable products such as shingles. Van Raalte decided to stay and became a land developer overnight, buying and financing thousands of acres of federal and state government lands upriver, establishing the city of Holland and its earliest enterprises. 2 years later, the colony's progress was evident, as immigrant Henrik van Eyck noted in his diary.
Conditions in the colony appear to be more favorable right along. Factories, handicrafts, and businesses are beginning to expand. Almost all summer, the mouth of the Black Lake was open. There were vessels in the city on and off. Laborers have earned good wages, peeling hemlock bark for the tanneries, splitting wood for the copper, and cutting wood for fuel, which makes for busy trade with Chicago. The government in Washington has sent 20 experts who measure the mouth of the Black River and also the lake by the city. As they report, if piers were built at the mouth of the river in order to stop the blocking of drifting sand from the Great Lake Michigan, there would be no better harbor and trade center all along Lake Michigan. Added to the support and reputation Van Raalte enjoys from the government, even the President of the United States urged favorable action from Congress concerning the recommendation to appropriate $45,000 to promote the Dutch colony in Michigan.
The same year Holland was established, resident Hoyt G. Post went for a day's outing along the dunes. Hoyt was the first to recognize the Black River waterways, later renamed Macatawa, as a desirable recreation spot. Word of the region's unparalleled natural beauty and resources quickly spread, birthing a thriving tourist industry. Only a dusty wagon track and ferries connected the beach area to Holland. Transportation was made easier with the development of ferry service. The Fanny Shriver Ferry was among the first to transport excursion parties from the city across the lake for pleasure outings. Black and white bass fishing on the lake became legendary, attracting fishing parties from Chicago and elsewhere. Frequent reports bragged of bass weighing as much as 6 3/4 pounds. Fishermen reportedly caught perch by the millions. Pickerel and catfish weighed in at up to 73 pounds, and muskellunge abounded. Recreating at Macatawa was now considered a fashionable thing. During the early 1880s, visitors came to the area from outside communities via train by way of Holland. Passengers transferred to ferries at Holland for the short ride to the beaches at the mouth of the bay. Economic potential inspired local businessmen to take advantage of the recreation area's expanding popularity. In 1881, 10 businessmen formed the Macatawa Park Association. They purchased 250 acres along the south side of the original Black River Channel and laid out plans for a hotel, cottage grounds, a road to Lake Michigan, and a 70-foot dock. The following June, the Macatawa Hotel was unveiled. Its parlor, billiard room, dining room, kitchen, 32 bedrooms, and veranda bustled with activity. Holland City News recognized the Macatawa Park project and the region's natural resources as an important new economic engine. A land rush was now on in full swing. By the time the movement peaked, 15 resorts would hug the shores of Macatawa Bay and Lake Michigan. Private investors purchased land to the south and east of the new Macatawa Park, dividing it into individual lots. E.J. Harrington, plotted an area which became known as Virginia Park. On the north side of the bay, Chicago businessman Judge John C. Everett and a local attorney, John Post, purchased 600 acres where Everett developed his Waukezu resort. West of Waukezu, another resort was under development. An investment group consisting of 63 individuals and companies from Holland, Allegan, and Grand Rapids formed the West Michigan Association, purchasing 54 acres along the north, now the Holland State Park site. The association quickly moved ahead with plans to divide the property into cottage lots and to construct a two-story Ottawa hotel overlooking both the bay and Lake Michigan. The hotel featured 36 sleeping rooms, providing guests sweeping water views. The Ottawa Hotel debuted during the 1886 summer season. Its success led to the construction of several additions, renovations, and updates, eventually providing the capacity to house 1,000 guests. Resort developers didn't count on nature or state-of-the-art facilities alone to attract visitors. They created entertainment worthy of the new century to entice wealthy vacationers from throughout the Midwest.
The hotel had tennis courts, a golf course, and riding stables, as well as the cooling waters of Lake Michigan and the magnificent stretch of sand beach. There were dances regularly at the hotel, with the sounds of waltzes wafting across the silent moonlit waters of Black Lake. And Venetian night was a time of special glitter and enchantment, with all the boats gaily decorated and twinkling with Japanese lanterns.
A stroll along Ottawa Beach's upper and lower boardwalks provided daily opportunities to socialize. Women showed off their flowing dresses and bonnets. Men appeared equally elegant in tailored suits and straw hats. Along the shoreline, bathing beauties made fashion statements dressed in bloomers and an overtop weighing up to 20 pounds when wet, while men bathed in near full body suits. Special events involved resorters of all ages: boat races, hiking, bowling, picnics, concerts, games, fireworks, and elaborate displays including parachute drops and hot air balloon ascensions provided unparalleled entertainment. Waukezu Hotel hosted Chautauqua assemblies, a popular educational trend of the early 20th century, offering culture and intellectual stimulation with a series of guest speakers. Golf became a part of the resort life in 1901 when Ottawa Beach Hotel opened a 9-hole course on 160 acres which had been a vineyard. Extravagant entertainment was contrasted by a sense of freedom, exploration, and simple pleasures nature provided, especially for children.
Yes, the boathouses are all along there, and we as children used to go down. There were hardly ever any boats in the boathouses, but there were several that were just there, and we go inside and fish. You could see the fish come up and take the bait. Sure. Because the water was clean enough. And then there was also a place near the dock that was shallow enough so we could go in and get crayfish.
Jennison Park innovated the entertainment scene, setting new standards for fun, thrills, and summer delights. The community began its climb to popularity in 1891 when twin brothers Luman and Hiram Jennison purchased Shadyside Summer Resort on the south side of Macatawa Lake from William and Charlotte Scott for the sum of $1,339. They renamed the property, and soon daily service to and from Chicago brought in a steady stream of visitors to the hotel, its 10 acres, dock and skating rink. The rink drew harsh criticism from some locals.
We know enough about the skating rink to show that it is frequented by some of the most immoral class, prostitutes and libertines, both married and unmarried. Does it improve a girl's modesty or morals to fall in a heap on a skating rink floor, in gaze of hundreds with perhaps her feet in the air and her clothes tossed over her head?
The Jennison brothers later converted their skating rink into a dance pavilion and beer garden. It became a favorite gathering spot for resorters, but it too was discouraged by locals. Only 6 years after acquiring the property and investing in a major remodeling project, the Brothers Hotel was devastated by fire. Its 100 guests fled from the burning building in the shadow of night, many wearing only bedclothes to save their lives, although valuables and money were lost. Plans to rebuild the hotel never materialized. Shortly after the fire, the twins, who had been lifelong friends and business partners, died within only months of each other, ceding the property to a trusted employee, who then passed it on to her niece, the wife of an electric railway executive. The series of events set the stage for a lucrative partnership. The woman and her husband merged their business interests to develop one of the area's major attractions, Jennison Amusement Park. Jennison Amusement Park, the ultimate turn-of-the-century recreational venue, was introduced to area visitors in 1903. It was a park the likes few had ever seen, with elaborate rides and entertainment illuminated by thousands of electric light bulbs in a time before much of America had been electrified.
There was a Ferris wheel and a carousel with galloping horses. The figure-8 roller coaster ride was a half-mile long through the open air. It was the most exciting. Most fun was the whirlpool boat ride. We went spinning through the water channels and tunnels into a dark cave when suddenly hundreds of colored lights came on, and you could see wondrous murals of jungles and animals of all kinds. And then the boat sped out and up a hill. From the top, you skimmed so quickly to the bottom that it took my breath away.
Jennison was also the site for the annual Farmers Picnic, an event hosted by Holland merchants for 15,000 picnickers each year. The popularity of the amusement venue prompted further upgrades in the electric rail system and improvements to the dock, making access to the vacation wonderland even easier. Resorters who looked forward to new thrills every season, and they weren't to be disappointed. In 1909, Angel's Flight opened. The inclined railway featured 2 cable cars taking passengers 220 feet high to the summit of Old Bald Head Dune. From a covered pavilion at the top, passengers took in sweeping views of Lakes Michigan and Macatawa. Nearby, another novel amusement took shape to add to the West Michigan Beach area's reputation as a premier playground. The year 1910 brought wealthy Chicago businessman George Getz to the region. Getz purchased land north of the channel for his Lakewood farm. The ambitious man, who would earn the nickname Holland Santa Claus, did everything in a big way and soon became a local agricultural leader. In addition to raising farm animals, Getz created a menagerie of animals from around the world to create one of the nation's largest private zoos. Lakewood was home to more than 300 creatures: monkeys, parrots, baboons, Pekin ducks, raccoons, leopards, tigers, lions, Rocky Mountain goats, camels, and numerous other small animals, and even an elephant fascinated farm visitors.
Yeah, that made me famous. Tom Pantlin called it one time. He said, "Aunt Hed, did you ever ride on an elephant?" I said, "Yes, I did."
Not all amusement at the resort communities had the approval of authorities. During the late 1880s, a few enterprising souls put the liquor rule to the test, running offshore bars and restaurants. Owners of what were called bumboats considered Lake Michigan to be under the control of the federal government and not beholden to Michigan law. The Ottawa County Sheriff took on bumboat operators, fining and jailing them. One day, a group of local ladies innocently visited one of these floating palaces, as they were sometimes called, and after recovering from their surprise and discovering questionable behavior, they took their testimony to court, expressing the general public sentiment opposing the businesses, a range of more wholesome and novel experiences. On a July day in 1913, the curious gathered to see the first flying boat aircraft arrive at the lake on a flight from South Haven.
Many people waited for hours for the arrival of the flying boats, and a goodly crowd of enthusiastic spectators greeted with cheers Havens and Verplank when they sailed gracefully over old Mount Baldhead, circled the lake like an enormous bird, and finally settled near Lakeside. Havens put on full speed from the landing place to the clubhouse, and the speed of the craft to the water as well as in the air is astonishing.
Fortune was sometimes built upon misfortune along the lakes. Following the Jenison Park Hotel fire in 1897, the Jenison twins sold the site to the Grand Rapids Yacht Club for construction of a new clubhouse. The organization was later renamed Macatawa Bay Yacht Club and boasted 75 members. It was the hub for many lake events. The club initiated Venetia Nights, a summer highlight, and held regular yachting regattas, the Chicago to Macatawa race, and the Lake Michigan Regatta. Boating activities attracted generations of resorters, including the family of President Gerald R. Ford.
Spent almost every day of my life down there at Ottawa Beach when we were there, playing tennis or occasionally going sailing. Jerry was very kind when he was at Yale, had the opportunity to take that boat out for sailing. They had a fleet of 22-meter boats. They were beautiful boats, Bob. They were made out of mahogany, and they were sleek, and the beam was very narrow, and they had races every Sunday.
The Ford family built a cottage on Lower Ottawa Beach in the 1930s, where the future president and his brothers enjoyed the resort area's recreation traditions.
He really liked Freddie, and I think she liked him. And his letters, she saved the letters that he wrote her. And she said she always could find Freddie. That's what we call him, Frederica, Freddie. Because there were always a whole lot of boys. She was in the center.
Freddie Pantlin was the belle of the ball, in my opinion, as a young man.
Oh, yeah.
Probably I was 13 or 14, and she was something special to a 13, 14-year-old.
You were taking the dog for walking?
Yeah, he came walking down with a newspaper in his hand and then looking at the boats, you know. And when he saw me sitting there, he came over and shook hands and sat down, and my dog kept looking up at me and looking at Jerry. And I said to the dog, "You want to go and see Jerry?" And then he his tail started going like this, you know.
Another of Macatawa Bay's famous residents served on the yacht club board. Frank Baum, an avid boater and author of the beloved American classic, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, took a place at the club's helm. Baum was also a member of the Macatawa Association Board of Directors. The author built his summer home at the beach with royalties from his book, Father Goose. In homage to the title, he named his cottage Sign of the Goose, and it featured a stained glass window portraying a goose. Neighborhood children gathered on the lakeside cottage wraparound porch where Baum would spin stories for their entertainment. Among the children was a young Chicago girl, Dorothy Gale, who became Baum's inspiration for Dorothy in the Land of Oz, played by Judy Garland in the film version. Baum summered at the Sign of the Goose until 1909 when he moved to Palm Springs, California.
The story is that Dorothy's sitting on the lap of Frank Baum. He mentioned that if I ever write a story about a little girl, I'm going to call her Dorothy. Just the friendship between the McRoys and the Baums, and passed down.
See, they had a place down there where they cut ice, and then they had a big ice house in the back part of the hotel, and all sawdust and all that.
Serving the thousands of guests who shared the enchantment of lake life took an army of workers. It was common for the hotels to employ teachers and college students on summer break. Local farmers found the resorts an excellent market. They prospered selling fresh produce, eggs, meat, and milk to the hotels. While the beaches overflowed with visitors during summer months, only a handful of residents remained throughout the year to watch over the empty hotels and cottages. Bill Murphy was one of the few who managed to carve out a year-round living along the shores. The Renaissance man of Ottawa Beach, Murphy was caretaker of the Ottawa Hotel. He ran a boat livery, a lunchroom, and was Ottawa Beach mayor, postmaster, chief of police, and fire chief.
That's my dad up on top there.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, sandwiches, coffee, and
Oh, Bill Murphy, sure, yeah.
soft drinks, lunchroom.
Murphy and his family occupied a small lapboard cottage sitting in the shadow of the Ottawa Hotel. Here, daughter Margaret grew up. Margaret worked and played alongside resorters and was eyewitness to the great forces shaping the resort community. Mother Nature proved to be both a powerful ally and indomitable enemy influencing resort growth. Unpredictable, vicious storms battered the coast. High winds shifted sands, repeatedly burying shoreline walks, threatening and sometimes destroying the cottages, harbor structures, and resort facilities.
Interesting to me is the sand that filled up those lower levels on the lower walk.
Yeah.
You know, when we were kids, Brother Jim and I were paid by the association to shovel out that sand down to the cement level. And they're actually, I'm told, Jim and I got it down to the level it is now right in front of the old cottage.
Transportation companies sprouted alongside resort growth. The steamboat Fanny Shriver was making daily trips to the shore by 1881. 2 years later, the Macatawa Park Association financed the construction of a 100-foot-long steamer able to carry 500 passengers, and by 1884 the vessel was making 3 trips daily. The following year, competition heated when the steamer E.S. Holmes moved into space leased by Macatawa. The event set off a physical confrontation, ending in the arrest of the Holmes owner and operators. Undaunted, they continued operations making use of other docking facilities. In 1886, the Chicago and West Michigan Railway brought its luxury steamer Queen of the Lakes from Elk Rapids, setting off a bitter steamship war. The fight for passengers and dock space for the Holland to Macatawa route continued until an agreement was made that the rail company excursion tickets would be issued to Macatawa Park via the steamer Macatawa, and the Queen of the Lakes would transport passengers to Ottawa Beach and Scotts Grove. The next season, the railroad constructed its own dock along 5th Street in Holland, allowing passengers to transfer directly from the trains to the boats. At the end of the season, the two steamers had transported an estimated 75,000 people to the beaches. The active waterfront demanded boat building and livery services. Brothers Joseph and Adolph Jessic seized the opportunity to grow a shipbuilding yard on the south side of the harbor. When their Jennison Park Boat Works was destroyed by fire in 1913, they rebuilt it near the inner urban loop, determined to become the best livery and shipyard on the lake. The new facility had 12 launches and accommodating rowboats and canoes. In 1927, they started a new shipyard and storage facility featuring an 800-foot marine railway to take in boats up to 75 feet in length for wintering. The brothers built some of the most envied boats on the lake. They used them for charter excursions. Lake transportation was critical as the flourishing resort drew larger crowds every year, and still no easy land route existed from Holland to the Lake Michigan beaches. That changed in 1897 when the Holland and Lake Michigan Electric Railway Company established passenger and freight service lines to the beach, to Saugatuck, and Grand Rapids. While electric railways were under construction across the country, the Holland City Council and Holland Township Board had to be convinced the typical practice of building lines along public rights-of-way would not jeopardize the safety of those who used the routes, or that the presence of the rail would not depreciate adjacent property values. The project finally received the green light, only to be halted half through its construction when the contractor ran out of funds. Convinced of the profitability of the line, the rail company poured more money into the project for its ultimate completion. In the spring of 1898, 100 men worked on the streets and 17-horse teams were employed to draw the ties and lay the lines. That 4th of July, the new interurban railway was in business transporting passengers to the resorts, guaranteeing riders they were to enjoy some of the most modern luxury cars in America. The trip to Macatawa at the speed of 8 miles an hour cost riders 10 cents, but the service was often unreliable. Nevertheless, it was well accepted by a public eager to embrace modern conveniences. In its second year of operation, the line was extended south of the steamer dock at Macatawa Park and a passenger pavilion built. The Park Association agreed to discontinue its ferry service from Holland in favor of this new electric railway. The railway drew new fans to the beach from far and near.
A connection, I think, Bob, that nobody realizes. My father, when he was in his late teens, maybe early 20s, worked on the interurban railroad that went down from Grand Rapids down to Ottawa Beach.
Sure.
So there was a connection between Ottawa Beach and Dad way back then.
Oh my, yeah.
And he worked as, I guess, a conductor, ticket taker, or
Oh,
whatever.
he did?
Yeah.
Through 3 rocky decades, the interurban provided transportation services. A 1900 fire at the car shed destroyed all 10 passenger cars and the company's snowplow. Replacing the cars at a time when they were in high demand for the nation's expanding electric railway systems was a challenge that could have shattered this line. Thanks to some wheeling and dealing for cars, they managed to survive the disaster. But there were still issues yet to come. The company was plagued by accidents, track washouts, and lawsuits, court battles over fares and right-of-way use. Despite many difficulties, the interurban prevailed. The rail company's ferry and freight services also saw successes, and they played a key role in the growth of the city of Holland. In 1904, now operating as the Grand Rapids, Holland, and Chicago Railway Company, it shipped commodities to Holland factories with 5 cars capable of transporting 20 tons. Resorts was supplied by Holland merchants via this interurban. It served as a mail carrier and provided 100 jobs, with most employees residing and spending their wages here in the community. The tides of change were quickly rising against the electric rail. Once the automobile came on the scene, giving citizens travel freedom, they abandoned other forms of transportation. By 1916, there were 169,000 cars on the roads in Michigan. That figure jumped to 730,000 by 1924.
That truck belonged to the hotel.
Making matters even worse for the interurban company, commercial trucks were now delivering supplies door to door at factories, changing the game for freight companies forever.
So they were making the road here?
Well, they probably were getting stuff that way too. But this down here was where they were putting it in. See, that store is right along in here someplace now.
Loss of freight and passenger numbers pushed the company to bankruptcy. It ceased running altogether on November the 15th, 1926. Much of Macatawa Bay's development would have not occurred without dedicated efforts to develop and maintain the harbor. Funding harbor projects was a challenge despite the multitude of commercial and recreational economic benefits a well-developed harbor pier system provided. In the 1850s, construction of a channel and pier was underway south of the current channel when a violent winter gale destroyed the partially completed project, causing a temporary halt until 1866, when federal funding finally became available. Changing water levels and washouts were constant challenges, and years were spent building and rebuilding, dredging and redredging this important waterway. In 1872, Congress appropriated funds to construct a lighthouse and a small wooden structure, which incorporated an oil lantern and pulley system. It was a busy harbor by the turn of the century. More than 1,095 schooners, steamers, and barges passed through the Blue Way in 1 year. In 1907, the present structure was built and named the Holland Harbor South Pierhead Lighthouse. It was rebuilt in 1936, painted navigational red, and nicknamed Big Red. A picturesque link to the area's past, Big Red has become one of Holland's iconic landmarks and the most photographed lighthouse of all 116 Michigan lighthouses. Another enduring part of Macatawa's early public infrastructure is the life-saving service which operated along the harbor. The inland seas are at times as unforgiving as they are inviting. Lake Michigan's intense storms made the U.S. Life-Saving Station at Macatawa a critical service. A predecessor to the U.S. Coast Guard, the Life-Saving Station was established in the 1880s by the United States Congress. A station and boat room was located east of the lighthouse keeper's house in 1886.
That was in the channel, on the south side of the channel,
Oh,
for many years. It got so if there was a big sea on, they had trouble with, it was so rough in the
Yeah.
channel too.
Every year the crew opened the station on April the 1st when the ice cleared, allowing them to perform daily shore patrols.
I buttered them up. Could you eat some of this? Boy, could we. They were just young fellas
sure.
in training.
sure.
Throughout its history, the station's crew provided brave and valuable service, from its very first rescue operation of the excursion boat Queen of the Lakes to operations aiding grounded schooners and sinking freight vessels. In November of 1905, heavy rains and brutal winds stirred the inland sea. The Graham and Morton steamer Argo, which had left Chicago the night before with 55 people on board, ran aground just north of the channel. Waves forced the ship against the piers and pushed it deeper into a sandbar. The life-saving crew launched its lifeboats despite the dangerous sea conditions, but the heavy seas made it impossible for the lifeboat to move anywhere near the grounded ship. The crew returned to shore and initiated an alternative plan, enlisting buoy lines to guide passengers safely ashore. It was January before the Argo was finally freed and sent to Manitowoc, Wisconsin for repairs. Commercial fishing on Lake Michigan began in 1913. Fishing tugs left the safety of Macatawa for a 20-mile trip out into Lake Michigan to take highly profitable trout catches. The life-saving station lost several of its skilled crew members to the commercial fishing industry that season. An exceptionally lucrative year. Fishing was not only an economic success, it was one of the most popular pastimes at Macatawa, and great catches were its trademark. As early as 1881, some locals voiced concern about overfishing, and particularly the practice of netting. Despite their concerns and efforts, they were unable to end the practice. No one had to make up fish stories at Macatawa Bay and Lake Michigan. The catches, in truth, were remarkable. The waters were naturally productive and helped by the planting of thousands of bass and walleye in Lake Macatawa in 1907 from the state of Michigan fish hatchery. Anglers came in all shapes and sizes.
It was a houseboat affair. Inside, you had benches on the outside, or you could sit on the inside. And the water, along the edge, you fish inside.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and our competitor put his out right behind it.
Pollution of the lake added to the problem. Great numbers of dead fish were reported during the period. As early as 1902, concerns surfaced. Raw sewage from Holland's liquid waste from the tannery and chemicals from local industries flowed unchecked into Lake Macatawa. Holland City Council found it prohibitive to correct the problems, and it wasn't until 1923 the City of Holland built its first sewage plant. Pollution and overfishing were only two of numerous calamities the harbor resort communities experienced. Storms were unrelenting and ravaging shoreline cottages, facilities, and harbor infrastructure. Shifting cultural trends and the advent of autos, allowing travelers to explore new destinations, all took a serious toll on the tourist business. Under these circumstances, the short-season resorts had to reel in profits proved unscalable for many, leading to bankruptcy after bankruptcy. But these misfortunes were no match for the most vicious enemy of all, fire. Fire was the perfect storm of the era. Unsophisticated heating and electrical systems were accidents waiting to happen. Once ignited, the wooden structures were rapidly ravaged. Worst of all, Macatawa and Ottawa Beach buildings were built into the dunes in manners limiting access of firefighting equipment. The first hotel fire at the Makatawa Hotel in 1894 caused only minor damage. But 3 years later, the Jennison Hotel burned to the ground. The Interurban barn burned in 1900, almost destroying the business before it was fully established. In 1905, the Virginia Park Hotel was devastated when a gas stove in the kitchen exploded. Crossed wires caused a fire at the Makatawa Hotel Annex in 1913. Staff extinguished the blaze, saving the facility from catastrophic loss. Despite the brigade of 500 men and the benefit of Holland's new pumper truck, the Olympia Pavilion, where orchestras played and headliners had performed, was totally lost in 1918. (1920) marked the end of the Pines Hotel to arson and a fire at the Ottawa Hotel Annex. Private properties also suffered calamitous fires. On a July evening in 1922, 31 lakefront cottages went up in flames when a kerosene heater malfunctioned while warming a cottage owned by a Grand Rapids family. Only 10 minutes after igniting the cottage, flames spread to a second cottage. Before the hour was over, fire had spread to the entire group of summer homes. Families in harm's way desperately pulled furniture and valuables to the water's edge for safety as they huddled together in disbelief as the entire row of cottages burned to the ground. Between 1922 and 1927, more than 150 private cottages were consumed by fire. In many instances, owners were uninsured and unable to rebuild. As devastating as these fires were, it was the Ottawa Beach Hotel fire which ended the glory days of the Black Lake resorts. The Grand Hotel was the cornerstone of a tourist trade which had passed its heyday and could never be revived. Decades of lavish entertainment and recreation ended in a matter of hours on a bleak November day in 1923.
Do you remember the fire?
Oh gosh, I was never so scared in my whole life.
Where were you during the fire?
My mother, my grandparents were there with us. And I guess my mother, people were coming in to help. The lights were out, you couldn't see what you're doing anyway. And I think she told my grandparents, take the kids and get over in the sand and stay there. Don't let them move around.
Right. That you remember all that stuff so well. Yeah.
Workmen had just finished putting on the final touches to a dance hall edition scheduled for unveiling the next season. Hotel caretaker Bill Murphy had closed the buildings for winter and had left on a hunting trip to northern Michigan. Before leaving, he disconnected electric service and drained the hotel's water tank. It was his typical wintering routine.
you say that your dad thought he saw the fire right in this area?
Well, it was in this area here. See, that was open, that one spot where you could walk from the back of the hotel through there out to the front.
Oh, okay. Like
And this guy that was down there hunting was scooting across there because that's where his boat was.
oh, sure.
His rowboat, he came from the Mac side.
Margaret was 11 years old at the time. Shortly after 5 p.m., a burst of flames caught the attention of longtime employee Edwin Antisdale, who was passing by. While the Holland Fire Department made the 20-minute run to Ottawa Beach, a group of volunteers attempted to save the structure. But the hotel's firefighting system rendered little help. Hundreds of volunteers came to assist firefighters who confined the blaze to the hotel annex, hotel laundry, and other connected buildings, saving the Murphy Cottage and 75 other cottages on the slope above the hotel. But despite their work, strong winds carried the flames in the air to the other side of Lake Macatawa. Cottages on the south shore were saved by a group of Holland men on their way to help extinguish the hotel fire. The men discovered a boathouse in flames at Virginia Park. Having no equipment, they broke into cottages to find tools enabling them to control the blaze. On the other side of the harbor, fires continued to roar. When daybreak broke, all that remained standing of the famous Ottawa Beach Hotel were its chimney and some concrete pilings. The cause of the fire was never determined. Hotel loss was estimated at $700,000. Insurance coverage was less than half that amount. Investors were unwilling to rebuild due to new construction costs, the brief operational season, and the changing times. Economic repercussions spread throughout the community. No longer would the resort bring in thousands of visitors and their dollars. No longer would the resort be able to provide reliable seasonal jobs. No longer would the hotel need support services or goods from local businesses and farms. Ottawa Beach Hotel fell victim to changing times, as well as fire's fury. The hotel property was purchased by the state 2 years following the blaze for development of Holland State Park. It ushered in the modern tourism period we now enjoy. Today, the park attracts more than 2 million visitors annually. Its beach recognized as one of the finest in the world. Many of the early cottages built along the harbor are now gone, replaced by new designs, year-round homes, and condominiums. Yet still, scenic Macatawa and Lake Michigan remain Holland's crown jewels, magnificent resources to be discovered, enjoyed, and treasured for generations to come. And it is 2 million, not 1 million.
Is that right?
Yeah.